And we are back for part 3 of the Cold Steel 3 and 4 community ranking. We're now up to what the community's general consensus suggests is the cream of the Celtic crop. Let's jump back in at number 10. We're starting off with the Honourable Steel Maiden. Aryan Road is a character that was built up quite significantly in the previous games, most notably in Asia, so seeing the spotlight shift to her was a welcome treat for Trails fans everywhere. And this quote sums up my personal feelings. I think her only low score is character development. She doesn't change much over the course of the series, rather we learn the reason behind her actions. Other than that, near perfect scores all across the board. Aryan Road is what I consider to be the embodiment of a saint. She fought in the War of the Lions alongside Drycles, who she developed feelings for, perished at the hands of the Vermilion Apocalypse only to be revived as an immortal for the true rivalry. So Aryan Road, or Leanne, is well over 200 years old by the time we see her in Cold Steel 3 and 4. And we find out why she has allied herself with Ouroboros in particular. Leanne at the time was aware of the curse eating away at the Emperor, and despite him never succumbing to its influence, it must have been hard to watch him slowly wither away while she could only watch on. Over the years, she would eventually find his reincarnated spirit in Erebonia's Chancellor, but the curse would once again take its toll. That alone was reason enough for Leanne to join the Grand Master. Her purpose was the same as many others: end the curse and free Erebonia from its tendrils in honour of Drycles. Despite her antagonist status, Aryan Road is respected by many. She's the pinnacle of strength and grace for many characters, a shining beacon to her Stolritter in particular, but she's also a juxtaposition of the role of Ouroboros. Up till now, many of their Anguis are just straight up evil or insane. She is the antithesis of that and opens up the idea that the society are more than they first appear on the surface. A fantastic character, and no surprise she ends up in the top 10. On to new Class 7's bad boy, it's Ash. Now initially, Ash did not get off to a good start with me, and it's because of that attitude. His brash nature is something I'm personally not a fan of in many characters, Wald being a good example here. It's a delicate balance to match that with the motive behind their spiky facade, and over time, I did warm up more to him. This quote should help. A delinquent with a heart of gold, he stands out from the rest of his classmates and knows how to push their buttons. His role in the story was handled pretty seamlessly as well, from his backstory to his actions during the events of Cold Steel 3 and 4. His interactions with the rest of the cast are very fun, especially his reactions to all the supernatural nonsense going down. And it's true, underneath all of that teen angst is an adeptly deductive and intellectual individual. He likes his books, he can read situations near on effortlessly when he really wants to. There's a lot going on with his character. What I really liked with Ash though is his story significance. Of course, being one of the 3 survivors of the Harmel tragedy, the aftermath of the attack implanted a seed of revenge within Ash. He harboured resentment to Erebonia for what they did, and the curse of course feeds on those insecurities. It amplifies those weaknesses to steer fate itself. And eventually, Ash became the sacrifice noted in the Black Records themselves. He's a real glimpse into the true power of Erebonia's innate sickness. And of course, with him being as proud as he is, we then see in Cold Steel 4 that he feels immense guilt for what he did, even if he was never really at fault. He's angry at the fact that he was a puppet for the curse, that he couldn't stop it from happening despite how strong he believes himself to be. But with the help of his classmates, he's able to break out of that stupor and finds renewed resolve to end it. Another strong character, and though he wouldn't be in my personal top 10, he would be very close to breaking in. Valamar really grew on me from Cold Steel 1. He was an excellent partner and he had an honourable personality. If there was a choice, I would have chosen Valamar as a bonding partner rather than any other female. Yes, give us the Valamar bonding event. Sheesh, is a lot better than some of the ones on offer. I'm gonna be real here though, I love Valamar. He is one of the coolest characters in the game, a true partner to Reen and a representation of his strength. Of course, by the time Cold Steel 3 comes along, Valamar has been with Reen for about a year and a half. Their bond is stronger than ever, as evidenced by his speech at the start of that game. He's practically another member of Class 7 by that point, eerily human in his mannerisms. And despite him going mostly mute in Cold Steel 4, I adored his final speech to Reen just before he disappeared. That was perfect to me. Valamar stood by Reen in Class 7 and watched them all grow. It's like he was content to pass on, knowing they had developed so well over that time. A great partner in all respects, one of the most badass designs in the game, and I implore Falcom to try and get some company to give us a Valamar figure. Make it happen and I will buy it. Okay, so this one confused me. Emma is no doubt more important than she was in the first half of Cold Steel, but top 10? That did surprise me, and I wasn't the only one. I never really was much into Emma. She's cool and all, but she never clicked with me the way most of Class 7 did. That being said, I can't deny she's arguably the most important member of the original Class 7, aside from Reen from a plot perspective. Her contributions as a witch are invaluable. Yeah, for sure, she helps Class 7 out of a pinch on many occasions, and she has invaluable knowledge to assist at times, but I don't remember much that she did individually outside of the bonding events. Anytime she would reveal more about the role of the Hexen clan or the gnomes, she would invariably share that role with Vita, Roselia, and Celine, so she never really gets the clear spotlight for herself. She's kind of just a part of a whole. I'd like someone to explain why they ranked her so highly, because I really don't understand it. Okay, so on to our main protag, and he does slightly better this time around. Watching Reen change from student to instructor opens a new door for his character. How will he act as the focal point of his new class? How will he shape his own style of teaching? But at the centre of it all is the extension of his story, the discovery of his actual role as an awakener, and his eventual reconciliation with his true father. I can't say I hated Reen in any way. I probably prefer Estelle as a protagonist, but Reen is definitely a well-written character. I won't go into more details, but all I know is that all endings in Cold Steel 1 to 3 left Reen in pain, sadness, and conflicting thoughts. But when I saw his smile at the end of the credits of Cold Steel 4, I cried. It's true as well. Reen really gets screwed in nearly every single ending of Cold Steel. Cold Steel 1 runs away and leaves his friends to potentially die. Cold Steel 2, man he hates his big daddy and all of his mates leave him. Cold Steel 3, literally consumed by despair and imprisoned to serve his role in the rivalries. It sucks to be Reen at times, outside of all the babes wanting his divine blade. So yes, it was very nice to see that true ending where Reen is actually smiling. He finally has a happy ending, which I think his character deserved. My only real problem with Reen is I question whether he has actually changed come the end of Cold Steel 4. A core trait of his persona is the idea of self-sacrifice. Reen would incessantly put himself in danger to protect those around him. That behaviour extends all the way to the end of Cold Steel 4 because don't forget he makes the ultimate sacrifice to destroy the curse in that normal ending. And outside of a miracle bestowed by a holy beast, he was about to do it once again. I think it's the only real weakness of the finale of Cold Steel 4 because that's the moment where I wanted to see Reen not try and shoulder the burden alone and entrusting responsibility to those around him instead. That being said, I do like Reen. I think he's a good protagonist and though not as strong as the others which I have mentioned before, he is decent overall. Due to her tragic backstory, I really wanted a happy ending for her. I think she deserves to be with Reen as the duo would be nigh unstoppable. She's cool, calm and reserved and unbelievably mature at a young age. Yeah, I'll be honest, like Emma, I don't have much to say about Fi. I think she has a better story arc than many of the OG Class 7 members and it was very nice to see closure to her personal struggle of losing her father figure. That scene just before Rutger disappears is well done, and like I said in a previous part of this ranking, I just wished there was more time to develop that relationship between them. Of course, we already know the bond that Fi shared with Zephyr's lieutenants. It would have been great to have a similar amount of time given to her bond with Rutger himself. That being said though, it's great to see her back again as a bracer following in Sarah's footsteps, and she has some decent moments here and there. But again, I can't understand why she ranks in the top 10. Now here's a character I can definitely understand the ranking for. One of you guys can take the stage first. Osborne will certainly go down as one of Falcom's best characters. A man who, while driving the world to possible ruin, did so to keep the real evil minimised. A character who lost everything, lost even more to try and save it. Had a few epic moments and some great dialogue between some of the main characters, and you have undoubtedly the best antagonist Trails has seen yet. I mean, this can't be denied as far as I'm concerned. Osborne is fantastic in every right. I know some people would have preferred if he stayed evil rather than having that focus shift to Ishmelga, but I know for a fact that I would have been mightily disappointed if Osborne's motive for everything was simply down to meh evil. He's the focal point of so many characters and Trails: Crow, the Ironbloods, Reen, Ishmelga. He is Cold Steel as far as I'm concerned. This is a man who gave up everything to eradicate his home's greatest evil. He was willing to become an enemy of the world to make it happen. I mean, the balls of this man must be made of iron. And don't forget, on top of all of his scheming, he had Ishmelga's influence around him for nearly 14 years. He had to convince Ishmelga that he was under his influence while also attempting to steer the perfect situation to eradicate it. And if you really need an idea of the power of Ishmelga, just look at all of the atrocities committed in the games. Look at Reen nearly succumbing to it immediately at the end of Cold Steel 4. The strength of Osborne is unfathomable, but he continued to fight and eventually he got what he wanted. His own son ended the curse, giving him the chance to finally talk with the young man not as enemies but as father and child. The sad thing is that Osborne will never be remembered as a hero. When Zemirians think of Osborne, they'll think of the crazed tyrant who nearly engulfed the world in war. They'll think of the ruthless methods he used to expand Erebonia's territory, and yes, it's understandable they would harbour animosity towards him. But though it's bittersweet that he will be remembered like that to many, it's comforting to know that a small handful realised the true hero he was. On to the other side of the coin now with Olivert. A fan favourite no doubt, of that I agree, and here's a quote to give us the reasoning why. The only negative thing I can think about Olivert is the fact that his romance with Shara was developed mostly off screen. We knew that he was attracted to her ever since the Sky trilogy, but I don't remember anything that hinted that Shara returned those feelings. He still manages to steal every scene he's in out of sheer charisma. Godspeed, O debaucherous prince, and may we meet again somewhere in Zemuria. Oliver may not get the amount of screen time that he probably deserves, but there's no doubt he steals the audience's attention when he does. And I'd say that overall, his role is better in Cold Steel 3 and 4 than it was in the first half of Erebonia's arc. As for the romance with Shara, if I remember correctly, he did say he had suggested something to her in Sky the Third, and she seemed open to reciprocate, so there was obviously something going on there. But I have to agree, I would have liked to see that relationship develop a bit more on screen, especially with Shara's return in Cold Steel 4. That being said, Olivert is undoubtedly important to the story, bringing forth the Courageous 2 to assist Class 7, being all out ridiculous without a care for prying eyes, and of course facilitating communication with the Round of 7 utilising his artifact. I think it's really cool to see Olivert as the creator of Class 7 facilitate the growth of the whole ensemble. He allows them to face the issues of Erebonia head on, and I can only imagine the pride he must feel in watching them overcome trial after trial. And yes, that true ending to Cold Steel 4 is the cherry on top of a top tier character. Crow did very well in these rankings. Both of them. He certainly has a draw to him if nothing else. But I'm admittedly more lukewarm on him in these rankings than I was in Cold Steel 1 and 2's. This quote sums up most of my feelings. I still believe he should have never been brought back. His death was important to Class 7 because it helped motivate them. From a story standpoint, it makes sense why he was revived, however I still don't like it. That being said, I think Crow's okay in the second half, primarily in Cold Steel 4. He does try to make up for his past actions in a way. Now, unlike our friend here, I actually don't mind Crow coming back. It makes sense narratively, but I would have been sad to see him go after all of the trials he along with Class 7 were able to overcome. And to be honest, I want to see him go back to 4s and actually graduate along with all of his friends before him. So that's not an issue for me. My real problem is the Azure Siegfried arc. I just don't really get what they were doing with Crow in that part of the story. I realised the point was to have him act out his role in the rivalries as the Azure Awakener, but I do think it was the weakest part of his arc. He's just kind of there to spout a few lines in the odd chapter, take on the odd fight, and then eventually regains his sense of self. In Cold Steel 4 though, he was much better. I really enjoyed the change of his role from rival of Reen to literal retainer and partner. Having Crow and Ordean join the fray added a new and welcome dimension to the Divine Knight battles, which are actually one of my favourite parts of the whole game. Also, seeing that he was willing to sacrifice himself with Reen in that normal ending was a real reflection of their individual bonds. Crow would have been in my personal top 10, but, I confess, not at number 2. If nothing else though, I will say he is one of the strongest that the Cold Steel arc has to offer. You guys have done good. Coming in at number 1 by quite a considerable distance, nearly 5 whole points above second place, is Altina Orion. Some of you guys know that I adore Altina. She's one of my favourite characters in all of Trails, one of my top 3 in fact. And this quote pretty much explains why. In terms of characters who improved during the second half of the arc, Altina's got to be right at the top. She goes from being this emotionless puppet to a complicated and colourful character. Altina is Falcom at their best in terms of character development. Altina is an example of a glow up to the highest level. In Cold Steel 2, she flattered to deceive. She was pretty much just a blank slate as evidenced by her somewhat plain personality. Come Cold Steel's second half though, and she steals the show. Altina maintains that personality from Cold Steel 2, but we're already aware very early on that she has changed in some respects, most notably in her relationship with Reen. The Northern War that they had both took part in was a catalyst for her change, the source of emotions that she couldn't even understand herself. Her role at the branch campus was arguably her hardest mission yet, as up to this point Altina simply obeys. She never questions. So when Reen asks her to think for herself, to choose the clubs and activities she wants to participate in, it raises a dilemma for her that becomes a focal point of her growth. She doesn't understand the concept of choice, she can't comprehend the idea of liking something, and seeing her slowly start to understand those concepts is a joy. Her love for pancakes, her jealousy when Reen and Milliam are about to go on a mission leaving her behind, her eventual recognition of Milliam as her sister, and the memory she makes at the campus all stored in that gifted camera. It's wonderful to witness, and of course that all culminates in her eventual desire to assimilate into the Originator Zero to save everyone she had grown to care about. And of course, the aftermath of that and Altina's reaction to the events were a clear indication to the player of how she had changed. This was not the same Altina from the beginning of Cold Steel 3, if that cry of despair was anything to go by. But as Cold Steel 4 continues, she then chooses to fight alongside Class 7 to not only bring Reen back, but to stop the inevitable ruination of the world. And it all ends very happily for her, as not only is the curse lifted, which basically means her destiny is now her own, but she is also reunited with her sister and Milliam come that true ending. One of the finest characters that Falcom have ever produced, and will remain one of my favourites for many years to come. That figure cannot come soon enough. And there it is guys, Cold Steel 3 and 4 have now got the community ranking treatment, and I'm very happy with how these came out. It was awesome discussing these characters with you guys, and of course it was only possible because of the votes you made. I thank you all for that. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you next week.